The Blast from Our Past Network.
Hey everyone, co-host Corey here. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Without you, Podcasting After Dark would not be possible. If you would like to help the show grow, please consider signing up at patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. You can also support the show by purchasing one of our awesome t-shirt designs on our merch store at podcastingafterdark.com, or by picking up a copy of 7 Winters Alone by David Irons on paperback, hardback, or Kindle. Just search for 7 Winters Alone on Amazon or click on the link in the show notes. A free way to help out is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those reviews are huge for us and really helps get the show in front of new listeners. Again, thank you all so much for the love and support you've given us over these past few years. It really means the world to us.
Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura, a deep dive into underrated and unknown television shows from our youth. Cartoons, sitcoms, cop shows, and much more. Sit back and enjoy some nostalgic fun with TV Obscura.
Oh yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage coming at ya. That was a terrible impression of Macho Man Randy Savage. There may be more terrible impressions throughout this episode of TV Obscura, but welcome to TV Obscura. Yeah, Tiny T, Sweet Sexy Z is gonna be running the reins, running all wild all over you on this one. Joining me as always is my beautiful, bodacious co-host, Corey Sleazy C. What's happening?
What's up? Thank you for show running this episode.
It's my pleasure, and I'll explain why in a minute, why I'm show running. But rounding out the triple threat, the three-way, if you will, and I'm not talking sexual, I'm talking straight up old school wrestling style three-way, is the Armageddon Diallo Jackson. What's happening, brother?
What's up, brother? What's up, daddy?
Who daddy?
Today we gonna get funky like a monkey.
Woo! There's going to be a lot of bad puns, a lot of bad wrestling impressions this day, depending on what time of the day you're listening to this episode. But this is our TV Obscura WrestleMania edition. By the time you're listening to this episode, WrestleMania most likely has passed, and you are the lucky recipients to listen to our WrestleMania TV Obscura. Are we going to run down our favorite wrestling television matches? No. Are we going to bring them up? Possibly yes. But we're going to go in a slightly different direction for this wrestling theme. While we will be talking about our love of wrestling, we will also be breaking down, discussing 3 very semi-obscure wrestling TV shows from the 80s. Corey, Sleazy C, brother, will be talking about Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. Diallo will be talking about learning the ropes. And I will be talking about Tag Team. Do these all sound semi-pornographic? Yes.
Yes.
Are they? No. But, just quick background. I am a huge wrestling fan. I've been a wrestling fan since the early 80s. Fun fact, my mom's PE coach in Michigan was George the Animal Steele. If you don't know who George the Animal Steele is, he was the bald guy with a green tongue who came to the ring with a little stuffed animal I think he called Thing. And he was in love with Miss Elizabeth at the time, Randy Macho Man's wife/valet. WWF character, larger than life. Well, he just happened to also be a PE coach in Michigan, and he was my mom and dad's PE coach at their high school at the going around the same time actually. But I've been a wrestling fan since I was a little kid. It was basically my babysitter for many years, and I love it indefinitely. don't really watch the current product, so most of my love comes from the heyday, the 80s, the 90s, toe dipping a little bit in the 70s, but it runs the gamut from WWF, WWE, WCW, NWA, AWA, WCCW, UWF, Florida Championship Wrestling. All these little letters that I just threw out to you may not make sense to you, but I tell you who they do make sense to, and that is one half of the three-way Diallo. Diallo, you are a fan of wrestling and always have been. Is this true?
Yeah, big time fan. I used to watch before I wasn't really into it at the time, but it used to come. The AWA used to come on TV 20 in the Bay Area. I used to watch that. I think like Chief J Strombo and the Claw.
Baron von
Raschke. Yeah, he used to do the Claw. They used to come on. It was like the same. It was like the same match every week. Remember Kurt Hennig one time with I think it was Kurt Hennig with the quarters. Was that when he won and he punched the dude with the quarters and they all?
It's when he turned heel.
Yeah,
I believe.
They all bounced in the ring and the ref didn't see them for some reason. But I didn't really like get religiously into it until a magical day in '87. I think we were doing the episode of Galaxy High, and I remember I used to watch Galaxy High and Teen Wolf back to back, and then I think I had just seen so many of the episodes, and I flipped it over to Channel 2. And it was like right in the middle of Superstars of Wrestling, and it was Piper's Pit when when Andre turned on Hulk Hogan, and my mind was just blown. And I was
epic moment.
From that moment, I'd watched Saturday Night's Main Event prior to that, but then up to then, I was pretty religious about it till like the mid '90s, dropped off. Watched it a little bit like, in that Attitude Era, and came back to a little bit watching it with you, some years ago. So.
Yeah, my wife to this day says you stole my friend Diallo from me because you guys we met at a bar and Diallo and I pretty much talked the entire night about Doctor Who and wrestling. And suddenly everybody was like, all the sound in the room went out and it was just us talking to each other face to face.
Yeah,
sharing thoughts.
It was like I always wanted to meet cute with a beautiful woman, but I guess it was with Zach instead. So.
He settled on a beautiful man.
Yeah.
So, and ditto. No, and yeah, our friendship definitely bonded over wrestling. I've had several wrestling parties back in the day, WrestleMania parties, which I like to call white trash parties, and we would watch WrestleMania, and the winners would get prizes. I think our buddy Jeff Brilovsky earned a wrestling mask at one point. Diallo earned a bunch of prizes. Corey, I kind of broke his saddle in on wrestling as well, but you go a little deeper than just the current product, Corey. But what's your love of wrestling or connection with wrestling?
Yeah. Well, and of course, that's one of the reasons Zach is show running this episode is because I really don't know much about wrestling. I grew up...
Isn't that a Sam Cooke song? Don't know much about wrestling.
Good one. But that is not to say that I don't know anything. I just didn't feel comfortable enough like running the episode with my lack of knowledge. But I grew up in the 80s, and I don't think you can, stay away from it back then. You were, somehow you were inundated with it. But my best friend Luke, who we always talk about, Luke, he's a big wrestling fan. So every weekend, if I was hanging out with him, I was watching wrestling. But I wouldn't watch it when I wasn't around him, So I still got like introduced to everything and all the characters and whatnot. I knew who they were and I recognized people, but I didn't follow storylines. I didn't, go to like watch WrestleMania or anything like that with them. But I did, grow up, enjoying it. And I would play, pro wrestling, the NES video game. And of course, like I remember the 90s when like Stone Cold was big and everything and kind of wrestling was mainstream and whatnot. And, so I do have some wrestling in my genes, but it's not something that I ever personally sort of pursued. But I never took a dive hardcore into it. I will say this. My favorite event has always been WrestleMania. I've always enjoyed WrestleManias, and I did see, I believe, the one where the wrestler died. He fell off the rafters. This is like late 90s, early 2000s.
That wasn't WrestleMania.
Owen Hart. Yeah.
That was Royal Rumble, right? Or Owen Hart?
That was a In Your House pay-per-view event.
Okay. Well, I will say one of my claim to fame is I was watching the pay-per-view of that pay-per-view, and I remember Luke and Xavier were both like, something went bad. Like, this is, everyone's breaking, whatever it says, breaking their character and stuff. They were like, yeah, something went down, and I'll still remember that moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, were you privy enough to watch the wrestling pay-per-view where one wrestler didn't show up because he was too busy murdering his wife and son and himself? Did you watch that one? No.
No, but I always did want to see the one where Sid Vicious broke his leg and basically shat himself when it happened.
That's a good one. So, yeah, I will, in just a minute, we're going to give Sleazy C a little bit of a quiz to see how well-versed he is on wrestling terminology. But before we do that, yeah, I just want to say wrestling in its purest form as a pure entertainment factor is, in my opinion, like the highest echelon of entertainment. You have a little bit of everything: romance, action, drama, blah, blah, blah. The backstory, the behind-the-scenes story of wrestling is so chaotic, so dark, so littered with just like the most bizarre stuff you could think of. And yeah, the story I referenced is about this guy named Chris Benoit. Look it up; it's wild. But there are many other crazy stories in wrestling that, shoot, we could devote an entire episode to just that, and a proper pad episode, which is about 3.5 hours, we could fill that with 3.5 hours of bizarre wrestling stories.
I do want to just really quickly say that anytime I watch wrestling with my friends, I always have a good time doing it. I think when I was on my own, it just seemed like such a hard thing to get into. There were so many stories. It was almost like trying to jump into like Amazing Spider-Man number 500 and like, this is my starting point, and there's so much history, and I'm just like, okay, it was hard for me to get into, but I always enjoy watching it, and I think it's a really like fun sport and like entertainment, and I really respect the people that do it, because I know it's a very hard sport, and I know it takes its toll on their bodies and their minds because they're working so hard for so many days out of the year and everything. So I have immense respect for wrestlers and everything. I was never able to sort of puncture through myself and get into it on my own, but I always love watching it with friends.
Yeah, wrestling can sometimes, and I think Diallo, you can attest to this, wrestling sometimes can be a hard thing to get into because storylines really never stop. It's like, it's pretty much the only form of entertainment that is continuous. It's daily, it's weekly, it's monthly, it's yearly. It never has a down season. Definitely has crappy storylines that make you want to turn the TV off and take a break for a little bit. But wouldn't you agree that wrestling is the only form of entertainment that never lets up?
No, there's one other one, and I happen to be a big fan of the other genre, what used to be, and that's soap operas. And
Yes.
It's the same exact thing. It's actually what pulled me into wrestling. People would ask me why I was so into it, and it was really about the storylines and the drama of it, and yeah, but for me, just like with soap operas, with wrestling, I can come back 20 years later and watch one episode, and you get a sense of whatever storylines are going on, and if something hooks you, you can get right back into it and keep going. But I can understand like what Corey's saying. Like, if you're not really inclined in the first place to really jump in, you probably won't.
Yeah.
True. Very true.
And also too, like back in the 80s, so this, the era that we're all going to be discussing, this was probably my favorite era, what I know most about. I remember watching it with Luke, but I remember that like you would always have a match of like Jake the Snake Roberts versus some generic guy with a mustache. And I was always like, okay. And I get it. They would save the big ones for later. But at some point, I know it switched, and I know you guys can probably inform me as to sort of when that switch happened, where everybody became a name and everything. But it was kind of weird when I was a kid, because I was like, no, I want to see Jake the Snake wrestle, the Nikolai guy or something. I don't know. You know what I mean, guys.
Yeah.
Like, I was trying to go face heel, but I didn't want to pick two faces or something. And by the way, I know what a face and I know what a heel is.
Well, I'm going to cut you off right there, and
Please
we're going to
do.
just jump right into this quick little quizzy quiz. So, what is a face?
Face is a good guy.
What is a heel?
Heel's a bad guy.
Okay. What does kayfabe mean?
All right, I'm going to try my best, but I think it means you stay in character the entire time. And so if you break it, and that was the word I was looking for when he died, Xavier said everyone's breaking kayfabe, and I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay, so yeah, so it means you stay in character.
Wow, so far you're 3 for 3. And what is a shoot?
Ooh.
In wrestling terms,
Yeah.
you perv.
I'm a shoot. I don't know, but I'll say I know what a mark is.
Okay, what's a mark?
It's like it's like when it's real to me, damn it. It's like when
Yes.
you're right, like
Yep.
you fall for it, like you marked hard for that thing, right?
Yes.
You cheer for it.
And shoot is when Diallo. What's a shoot?
I might actually get this wrong, but because I wasn't actually big on the terms when I was watching. But a shoot, I think, is just like is it like the angle that you're taking for whatever storyline you're doing? Basically,
It's basically when you abandon the storyline and you just go off for real, quote unquote. ECW was infamous for that, where the guys would break character and they would shoot on someone, maybe telling a personal story about them in the ring, and really getting the fans to be like, oh shit, they weren't supposed to talk about that,
So you let out some like real information that's not the character type of thing.
Yes.
So wait,
yeah,
it's sort of a way of breaking kayfabe, but still like staying sort of in it. You're like, it's like a hint or something.
It's a little bit. You saw a lot of that during the Attitude Era, in the 90s. The perfect example is when Bret the Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels were wrestling, and Vince McMahon allegedly called an audible and had Shawn Michaels win the title at the end, and Bret Hart lost the belt because he was leaving WWF to go to WCW, and Bret Hart flipped out, spit on Vince McMahon, and was yelling at him outside the ring. And that was kind of the beginning of the Attitude Era, which things started getting more real. Like people were shooting on it. People were shooting on each other.
Is that also when Vince McMahon started getting into the storylines too, and it started becoming like the whole, like everyone was against him and stuff like that, and he's the big evil boss.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, Diallo, what was he pretty much known for?
Yeah, he was just the announcer up until that point. I mean, I knew he was the owner back in the day, but yeah, he was just the announcer. And then I had kind of gone away from it, but then all of a sudden he was like the evil CEO, and he played that role to the hilt. It was good.
Truth becomes reality, or truth becomes stranger than fiction, I suppose.
Or life imitates art, maybe?
Yes, totally. Because the era that we're kind of focus on, the 80s and toe dip into the 90s today on this episode, it's when kayfabe was at its highest peak, probably, when wrestling was considered, everything's real, right? And when we say, if we ever say the word fake, it's only in the sense that the outcome was predetermined. But the action itself, for the most part, was real. These guys are putting their bodies on the line. They're getting injured. Like Corey was saying earlier, when some random dude with a mustache, and Corey, do you know the name of like a random wrestler that always loses? Do you know what that's called?
Oh, it's not a heel. It's not, damn it, I don't.
Diallo?
It's a jobber.
Oh, a jobber. I knew that. Xavier would be so fucking mad at me right now. I knew he calls me a jobber all the time. God damn, I knew that.
Because we're not cutting that out.
Wait, no, we're not. Can I ask you really quick, Zach? Kayfabe, is that an acronym? Like, what is that?
I think it was created when in the wrestling era.
Okay, so
during
it's just
the 70s.
It's just a made up word then. Okay.
Yeah, and one of the greatest jobbers of the 80s was a guy named Barry Horowitz, who lost almost every match. And Diallo, what did he do when he came to the ring?
Yeah, he was patting himself on the back.
Yeah, and then he had a vest with a handprint in the spot where he's supposed to pat himself on the back. I think we're probably going to reference mostly WWF storylines or angles throughout this because we're talking about WrestleMania. Obviously, WrestleMania is the culmination for WWF. However, now we have AEW, we've got Impact Wrestling. There's still other divisions. Ring of Honor, for example, Major League Wrestling, I think might be another one. But
is NXT one of them?
NXT is a part of WWE.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's like their farm division. But back in the 80s and 90s, the hot properties were territories that were, I think in the 70s and 80s, really, there were territories spread out throughout the United States. It wasn't just WWF. Diallo, can you explain like what a territory is or what the whole idea was behind the territories?
Yeah, territory was literally just like they were like regions of the country that certain promotions sort of they owned, quote unquote, owned that territory. So AWA was like really kind of like West Coast-ish. NW,
they were like Minnesota based.
Minnesota based, okay. And then what do you call it? There's like Mid-South.
Mid-South, yep.
NWA, which kind of rolled up into like Mid-South and West. It was like West Virginia. It was like a Virginia League or something. And then WWF, but WWF was something else before. I can't remember what it was.
Well, it was WWWF.
WWF, yeah.
And then there was Florida Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, ECW was there.
Eastern Championship Wrestling before it became ECW Hardcore. That kind of came out in like the late 80s, early 90s, I think.
There's the one where that's the one where Dingo Warrior and Sting were tag team. Was that the same league?
That was World Class Championship Wrestling, which came out of Texas. And Corey, if you want a wild story, and everyone listening who's not familiar, World Class Championship Wrestling was kind of founded by the Von Erichs. It's a family of five. The father, and then he had 5 sons, and 4 of those sons are now dead.
Jesus.
And only one's alive. And 3 of them were through, 2 of them were through suicide.
Damn.
It's a wild story. There's a documentary on YouTube called Heroes of World Class. If you want something that gives you a real background, and this is where like Diallo and I will just go on for days about our love of some of these characters. This is where like, World Class Championship Wrestling had the Freebirds, and they came out with Confederate flag robes at the time, and they came out to the song Freebird by the Allman Brothers Band, but this was like a Dirty South kind of wrestling division, and really really cool World Class Championship Wrestling. But
and
anyway,
that became WCW, right? That's WCW?
No. What did WCW? What was that originally, Diallo?
In my understanding was that it was the NWA, and the NWA rolled in a couple other promotions and became WCW.
Yes.
Jim Crockett Promotions, which has a lot to do with one of the shows we're going to talk about today.
Indeed.
Yeah, was sort of like the mastermind behind WCW.
Okay.
That's right. And before we get into these 3 shows, I want to sprinkle in promos from WrestleMania moments. The first one is Hulk Hogan in 1988, WrestleMania 4. WrestleMania 4 was a little bit different from the previous WrestleManias because it was a tournament to determine who was going to be the World Heavyweight Champion. Up until that point, Hulk Hogan was the big deal. Well, there was controversy prior to that, and he did not have the belt, and there was a tournament, and he was planning on facing Andre the Giant. It was held at Trump Plaza in Atlantic City before Trump became who he is today, unfortunately. And Mean Gene Okerlund, the voice of the backstage in WWF, was interviewing Hulk Hogan. And he says, speaking of Hulkamaniacs, Hulk Hogan, we have seen them here in Atlantic City, and I know millions others are watching very intently all around the world. And this is what Hulk Hogan says in reference to Andre the Giant. Yes, but if you look in their eyes, man, you see the fear in all those little Hulksters. They realize that when I get Andre the Giant cinched up in the launch position, when I slam him through the Trump Plaza, brother, from New York down to Tampa, Florida, the fault line is gonna break off. And as Andre the Giant falls into the ocean, as my next two opponents fall to the ocean floor and I pin them, so will Donald Trump and all the Hulkamaniacs. But as Donald Trump hangs on to the top of the Trump Plaza with his family under his other arm as they sink to the bottom of the sea, thank God Donald Trump's a Hulkamaniac. He'll know enough to let go of his materialistic possessions, hang on to his wife and kids, dog paddle with his life all the way to safety. But Donald, if something happens, if you run out of gas and all those little Hulkamaniacs just hang on to the largest back in the world, I'll dog paddle us, backstroke us all to safety.
How much coke do you have to do to cut something like that? Cut a promo
And that's
like
half
that.
of the promo. That's half of the
Jesus.
promo.
And so when they do promos like this, it's off the top of his head, right? They're riffing, right? I mean, I know what they got to say, or what I'm sure they know where they have to sort of go with it, but they're kind of riffing, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a mixture. I mean, they get talking points. They get talking points ahead of time, what they got to cover. But I think this is something that people forget, who are maybe not wrestling fans. These guys, they gotta physically do something in the ring, and they've got to act and stay in character the entire time and do these lines. So that's pretty impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I've always thought it was really amazing. I mean, obviously you have some real duds out there like, oh, I know all about the Shockmaster. I remember that whole scenario. I remember that build up and him tripping, falling through his entrance. I mean, yeah, they had to not just be physically in the ring, but they had to just have these personas and, think on the spot, stay in character, not cuss. Like, I mean, it's a lot of stuff going through your brain, and people are like, oh, sometimes they hit us up. They're like, oh, you forgot to mention this on the podcast or that. It's like, man, like when we're doing the show, I don't know about you guys, but like I'm like constantly thinking about what I'm going to say next. I'm trying to think about what I'm saying now. It takes a lot more work than it does to just talk to somebody. So with this knowledge of podcasting, I can only assume the same amount of work, if not more, because these guys are fucking professionals. I've always been impressed by an awesomely cut promo and how some of these guys can just stay in character and just produce some amazing verbal content like that.
Well, we will get to some pretty sweet promos later on from maybe, in my opinion, one of the best promo cutters of all the times, Jake the Snake Roberts. But fun fact about Shockmaster, who you referenced, and if you guys don't know who Shockmaster is, just type that in and on YouTube, and you'll find out
with
really
his pink
quick.
Sparkly Stormtrooper helmet.
Yes, so that guy used to be known as Tugboat in the
I know.
WWF, and then he went on to become Typhoon. He was a face with Hogan, and then he became a heel with Earthquake, and became a tag team partner of Earthquake, and in WWF for a minute, and then I think they both went off to WCW, and that's when he became the infamous Shockmaster, aka the Amazing Blunder.
I saw somebody made one of those fake toys, and like they put him in upside down, like, and then like on the
It's
back,
a real toy.
Oh, okay. So they did.
It came out that way. I have that toy.
That's great.
Still in the box.
Love it. I love.
He came in the
Shockmaster.
toy upside down on purpose. It's hilarious.
Oh,
But
man.
I will say, let's jump into the heat of the matter, and we'll sprinkle in tidbits here and there as we move on. But we're gonna talk. Corey's gonna lead us in discussion first about his pick, which is Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling. Corey, what's the story on this TV show?
Hey everybody, Corey here. I just wanted to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
On the winter solstice, when the lasting darkness threatens to descend upon the land of Atalan once united, Magi in training, Wilt Gairn, and his shepherd, warrior in training, Brigade Adair, must find an ancient lost weapon before the ultimate ancient evil returns to the world of Eos. Hi there. I'm Adiella Jackson, writer of the First Noel's Chronicle podcast. The First Noel is an epic, family-friendly adventure told in serialized form. Think of it as Lord of the Rings meets, well, Christmas. Join us each week for the next thrilling chapter of the First Noel, now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and all major podcasting apps, as well as Kindle Vella if you want to take a read. Thanks, and see you in Adelan. The winter tell is almost here.
And now, back to the show. Yeah, this was kind of the only thing I could really bring to the table for this discussion. But I used to watch this show. I used to like this show. I used to watch it on Saturday mornings like everybody else. And like I said, even though I didn't watch wrestling on my own, it was still around me all the time with people like Luke, and then later in life, my buddy Xavier, and then later in life, you two guys. So I've always, honestly, my closest friends, and Jeff's a wrestling fan too, always my closest friends have always been strong wrestling fans. So I've picked up a lot through osmosis. But
Interesting.
I watched this one on my own as a kid. Came out, so Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling came out in 1985, ran from 1985 to 1987. It was an American cartoon series that aired for two seasons on CBS Saturday mornings. Like I said, 85 to 87. The third year was just reruns. It was produced by Deke, who we all know and love. Deke. And also with Saban Productions and the World Wrestling Federation. So the show would be animated, but it would have live action segments in between the animated segments. But due to their busy schedules, the characters were voiced by actors instead of the wrestlers, with notable talents like Brad Garrett as Hulk Hogan, James Avery as Junkyard Dog.
Whoa.
James Avery, Uncle Phil, and the Shredder. Louis Arquette played Jimmy Snuka, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. And Charlie Adler as Roddy Piper, and Neil Ross as Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund.
Also Shipwreck, isn't he Shipwreck?
Yeah, that's why
Ross?
I called Neil Ross out, because I
Nice.
knew you would know who he was. So this is interesting. Due to the longer production times for animation versus live action, the show couldn't keep up with the characters in real life, changing sort of face to heel. Yeah. So example, Roddy Piper starts as he's a heel in real life when the show starts, but by the time the show ends, he's actually a face. But on the show, his character stays heel the entire time. He's also the main bad guy. And then the reverse happens with Andre the Giant. He was face the entire time, and then he flips to heel during the run of this show, but they don't have time to make those adjustments. So basically, everyone who starts out so basically whatever the characters were in 1985, that's how they're going to be on the show, moving forward, face or heel. You don't see any real or too much wrestling on the show. It was the ring kind of wrestling it was there to sort of inform the viewers as to who was good and who was bad, and they kind of jumped off from there. I watched the first episode. I forgot that they were basically each 30-minute episode is two cartoon stories. So two 10-minuters, and then a bunch of live action skits and things here and there. First, I'll talk about the skits and the live action stuff. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun to see these characters, or see these actors, see these wrestlers doing their thing. And it seemed like, at least from the limited stuff that I saw with the show, it seems like they really tried to take these live action tiny skits, like little 1 minute, 2 minute skits, they're out of the ring completely. So they try to put them into actual, almost SNL skits of sorts. And I was like, that's interesting. I kind of enjoyed that. The animation, I did not. It was, guys and gals, not the strongest cartoon we've ever discussed on TV Obscura. I think if I was older when this hit, because 85, I was 7 years old at that point, so I was pretty young. I think if I was a little bit older, I don't know if I would have gravitated towards it, but the character designs were cool. I liked the way, I thought they did a good job of making them cartoonily look like their counterparts. But it's design-wise, it was fine, if not a bit simple. But the animation itself is not great in this show, or at least all the episodes I watched. I watched the first one, and then I watched like a couple other ones just to kind of skim through and find like I was like, yeah, the animation's kind of trash in this. But I enjoyed it as a kid. I do have a lot of nostalgia love for Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, but I think I'm just going to keep it that way. I'm just going to keep it in my past and say, you know what, that was something I enjoyed at the time, and I did. I loved it as a kid. I remembered it fondly. I don't think it holds up well today. It was a pretty rough ride, guys. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about it, and I'm also curious to hear, did you guys like it when you were younger? Because it's kiddie. It's aimed real young, I think. Diallo, what were your thoughts on Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, man?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when it was on, it was like a little bit before I was actually religiously watching wrestling, but I used to tune in every once in a while because at that point, wrestling had kind of started to hit a fever pitch, and like you were saying earlier, you couldn't really escape it. But it never was anything that like kind of really pulled me in. Obviously, the story, it's funny. It's funny what you said about the animation, because when I was just watching it yesterday, it actually reminded me of like early 90s cartoon animation. That's like that style was it. An issue with 90s style animation isn't the word that I would use, but I definitely feel like there was like a drop off in American animation at that time. But anyway, so that's what that reminded me of. But yeah, it was just serviceable. Yeah, I mean, obviously it was aimed for kids. That's what the whole WWF deal was about. How they marketed all their characters, and yeah, it was just it reminded me kind of like any other cartoon in that era, actually. Not the big ones, not like the Smurfs or Gummy Bears, not the ones that were kind of long running, but the ones that they were just on. They would end up on TV Obscura at some point. Like they last 13 episodes. That's what it was. Watching it the other day, I had no problem with it. It was fun for me just to watch, because I hadn't like seen a lot of those. I mean, not that they were actual real life, but just like I haven't seen depictions of them in a little bit, so that was kind of fun for me to watch. But like I think, like you were saying, the mid episode promos were like the fun parts, and I actually thought they were like genuinely funny too.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah,
there was
Bobby
one where
Heenan was doing his,
his brain thing.
Yeah,
it was who's the Russian guy? Nikolai Volkov?
Yeah.
There's one where like some lady locked her keys in her car and he rips off the door.
Yeah,
and then he gives her the keys. She's like, "No, it's broken now." He like puts the door back on, and then like he opens the door, and then they both look at each other and they like laugh, and I'm like, this was really cute.
Yeah,
that was a good one. And then the Bobby the Brain Heenan one and everything, they were really fun.
And some, like in the WWF at that time, they're actual on the like Superstars of Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge shows. They actually did semi that often. Okay. I don't know that they went that hard with like an old lady with the door on, but they did a lot of like fun, goofy stuff, on the weekly shows. And then, I mean, there's also the famous Slammy Awards where they just go crazy doing a whole bunch of wacky stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it definitely was, and that, it was a show that it was a couple seasons. How long did it go?
It was 2 seasons.
Yeah. So just, it was fine, but it was, I think it was in line with a lot of, because they had the figures at that time too, right? Those bendy figures. Zach, you have some, I'm sure.
LJN, LJN came out with those big hunks of rubber.
Yeah.
Man, you could kill somebody with one of those toys back in the day.
Yeah, totally. My brother used to hit me with them. So
yeah, they were fucking. I've been hit by one too. They fucking hurt.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, but good call, Diallo. Serviceable. I like that term, and I think that's I think that's appropriate for Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. Zach, what's your connection with the show, if any, and how did it hold up to today for you? And did Bodie watch it with you?
I was obsessed with the toys. I wanted toys so bad, and when those toys came out, I'm like, they don't move though, you know. And I was so disappointed by the fact that they didn't move. AWA actually came out with action figures at the time that were made by Remco, and so they were based on the He-Man mold, and they actually moved and looked like. I still have the ring, and I've got the original like 6 figures that came with that. I loved AWA toys, and then the WWF ones came out and like, but they don't move. What do you do with them? You know, hit each other. The cartoon came out, and I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. They're going to be in the ring wrestling cartoon versions, a la Muscle, the Japanese manga comic. You know, that actually was a really cool American cartoon that came out many years later, I think on Fox. But it didn't. It was like those kind of stupid skits, like the 10-minute episodes. There was like, oh, Junkyard's has a robot and someone's getting a truck stolen or whatever. It was just really silly. But so I didn't like it as a kid. Now I watch it and it's very nostalgic and it's very kitschy and it's serviceable. I'll watch it now. But the skits to me is what saved it. Bobby the Brain Heenan is gold. That guy, for those that don't know, he actually was a wrestler for some time too in the AWA before he became a full-fledged manager and commentator. The guy is improv gold. He can do no wrong. I'm sure that entire skit that he did in that first episode where he's weightlifting was 100% improv and unscripted. I can guarantee you.
He was selling it so hard at the beginning, like you didn't know that it was gonna break into comedy. Like
Yes,
it
yeah,
was
he
so
sells
good.
it. Yeah, and for those that don't know, what does selling mean, Corey? What does that mean?
It means like, I know what it. I'm trying to hold on. Give me a second. It means like you're staying in character and you're really like pushing the point forward of this like character message or like what you're trying to do, and you're not breaking kayfabe.
Yeah, when you're getting hit, and you know, or if you're in a
I was thinking about it more in a promo term. Yeah, okay. In the ring, you sell a hit or something. You know, your opponent hits you, and you sell it. And I don't. I'm sure there's a term when you botch it, right, and you don't sell it correctly.
Yeah, botch.
Okay, you just botch it. But yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, I mean, it's wrestling. When it's always a team effort, opponent, non-opponent,
Totally.
because the person that you're fighting against is also working with you to keep you safe. They're both keeping each other safe, and they're also selling each other's moves. It's a dance. It's a beautiful thing. It's actually amazing how much effort they both parties put into a match and everything. But yeah, selling it means like if you get hit by someone else's hit, it's not like a huge hit in real life, but you make it seem like it's going to be a huge hit.
Yeah, and if you don't sell it, then you can get your ass handed to you, a la Lex Luger from Bruiser Brody back in the day. If you want to see a wild match, Bruiser Brody was a WCCW wrestler all over all the territories, but he wrestled in Japan, a lot of time in Japan. I think New Japan Wrestling or something like that. All Japan, something. Anyways, New Japan, I think. And he was wrestling Lex Luger, and Lex Luger was being an idiot in the ring. And for those that don't know who Lex Luger is, Diallo and I very well know that guy was a big deal for a while,
Yeah.
and then he's partly responsible for Miss Elizabeth dying. Yeah, look that story up. Anyways, Bruiser Brody got so pissed. This dude, if you look up Bruiser Brody, I guarantee you, Corey, he'll be your favorite wrestler, Bruiser Brody, because he was a fucking badass. And this guy was like, nope, I'm not selling anything that Lex Luger does to me because Lex Luger's being a chump in the ring. And there's a great match on YouTube, I think you can find it, where Luger like basically gets out of the ring as soon as he can when the match is over because he knew that Bruiser Brody was going to kick the shit out of him. And he would have.
I see a picture of Bruiser Brody here with all the cut lines on his forehead. My
Yes.
God,
Yeah.
it looks like a wrinkled old man, but just on his forehead from all those cut lines from when they were. Man, that was an era that was crazy when all the blood era, you know.
Yeah.
happened.
Well, that's mostly NWA and the territories, right, Diallo?
Yeah.
That most of the blood matches came out of the stuff that WWF did not do. That's why WWF had a cartoon like this, because they were so kid friendly. But NWA, yeah, guys would hide razor blades in their tape. Roddy Piper told a story once about how he was held down in the back in NWA era, I think Florida Championship or Mid-South, and they sandpapered his forehead down, and then they put they put ice on it to stop the bleeding. So midway in the match, he gets smacked in the forehead, and the blood just starts pouring out.
Jesus
and
Christ.
Diallo and I, one of our favorite wrestlers, the American Dream, Death to Rhodes, baby, had scars all over his face
All
and arms
over.
from those matches.
Yeah.
And Abdullah the Butcher, a very famous cutter. The guy used to cut the shit out of people with forks and all sorts of weird stuff.
Jesus.
Yeah, and they, and conversely, they had like a no blood rule or something like that in the WWF.
WWF, yeah. Yeah, and then even to this day, if someone gets bloody on TV in a replay, they do black and white. Oh, because you can't tell if it's blood when it's black and white. Woo! Anyways, yeah, rock and wrestling, it was, it makes sense why WWF doesn't put the license out and put this out on DVD or Blu-ray.
And do we have a Bodie rating for that one, for this one?
Bodie was not a fan of this.
Okay.
He was like, because he's so engrossed in G.I. Joe right now.
I was about to say, Bodie's probably reading Shakespeare by now. I know.
Yeah, right. I mean, he loves his humor. This was like kind of just stupid. The jokes are just dumb. The skits are funny, and he actually laughed at a couple of those. So on a Bodie rating, he didn't give it a number on this one, but I'm going to do it for him on a scale of 1 to 5. I'll probably give it like a 2.
Ooh.
Wow.
But I will say,
Proxy Bodie is harsh.
But I will say to Corey, like I think the three of us are all in agreement that like I'm glad this show exists. I'm glad we have it.
Yeah, of course.
Because the animation of the wrestlers, the cartoonish animation, was really cool actually. Like from a still perspective, if you just look at them from a still.
That's what I'm saying. I like the designs, like of how they're caricatures. That was my favorite part of the animation aspect of it. Was I liked how they represented the wrestlers and everything. And it'd be one of those things where I'd rather now engage it with like toys, as toys that actually look like that animation style.
I love that.
Than actually watch the episodes themselves.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead.
If you were to ask me, like, what was that early 80s or that mid 80s WWF era, I would almost point them to that cartoon rather than any of the matches, because that kind of sums up on so many levels what that WWF era was about.
Absolutely, and it's a shame that Jimmy Superfly Snuka at one point was supposed to be the biggest thing. He was going to win the championship, but then allegedly he killed a woman, and Vince McMahon covered it up.
Yeah, a little thing.
Man, we could probably do a whole TV Obscura of like terrible wrestling facts that happened.
I would love that.
There's so many.
But before
Diallo's lost in thought. There's just so many.
So many. Like
before we get to Diallo's show. And I'm really excited about that one. I'm going to read you another promo. This one's from WrestleMania 5, the build-up to WrestleMania 5. It's from Macho Man Randy Savage. It was when the Mega Powers collapsed. So it was Hogan and Macho wrestling each other.
The Mega Powers.
Yeah, so as we know, they after WrestleMania 4, Macho Man Randy Savage won the world title. He was the champion, and then Hogan was his buddy, right? And then Miss Elizabeth and there was like a three-way conflict there where Macho Man got really jealous. In real life, he got jealous too of Hogan, but this is part of the promo that he cut on Hogan. So he said, "Oh, yeah, Hulk Hogan, not only are you a hot dog, a grandstander, a showboat, and a prima donna, but you're a liar too. In fact, I remember a time when we stood in front of the man that does nothing but lie, Brother Love, and you told some of the biggest lies that I've ever heard in my whole life. That's a lie, Hulk Hogan, and that's enough to get me hot. But what you said to Elizabeth is enough to get me to the boiling point. Yeah," because he said he loved Miss Elizabeth. Hulk Hogan, you say you love Elizabeth. I got news for you, man. Yeah, I got news for you. Elizabeth is going to be in the corner of the Macho Man Randy Savage at WrestleMania 5. Yeah. And let me tell you something. You say you love me like a brother. Well, you listen to this, Hulk Hogan. I hate you. I hate your guts. And that's what's going to be left all over the mat after WrestleMania 5.
The cream always rises to the top.
Yes.
Danger zone, yeah.
And when it ended up happening, Miss Elizabeth was in a neutral corner. And Hogan won the title from Macho. But it was a great build-up. And
Who was Woman? I thought Randy Savage's his lady was Woman.
that was, no, Woman was Chris Benoit.
Oh, Chris Benoit. Yeah, okay. All
Real
right.
life wife. Woman was the valet for a tag team called Doom in NWA WCW. Do you remember that? Doom? Diallo?
Was it like, I'm trying to think of, I was thinking of the ripoff of the Road Warriors that was in WWF for a bit.
Oh, the Powers of
Powers
Pain?
of Pain, yeah. But no, I
Yeah.
don't.
Doom was Hacksaw Butch Reed, who in the WWF he was the natural Butch Reed. He was this black guy with bleached blonde hair, and then he went to the NWA, and became just straight up Butch Reed. And Ron Simmons,
yeah,
who
that's
later
right.
became known as Farouk
Yeah.
in the WWF. He was the first black WCW champion, I think.
Yeah.
But they were a tag team under these black masks, and they would wrestle guys like the Steiner Brothers, in my opinion, the greatest tag team of all time, or my favorite tag team of all time, the Steiner Brothers, who, by the way, were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this past WrestleMania weekend. And Woman was their valet.
Okay.
She's been in the business forever. Kevin Sullivan was who I think she originally was with. That's a story right there. Their relationship with Chris Benoit, and then he became her husband, and obviously that's why she's no longer with us.
Yeah. Well, going back to happier times, can I say that one of my favorite moves in wrestling is the Frankensteiner?
Oh, yeah. It's a great move.
Without a doubt, if you guys don't know who the Steiner Brothers are, look up Steiner Brothers Tag Team, NWA or early WCW, because that was the shit, right, Diallo? Like those guys put on 5-star matches.
Yeah, they were great. Scott Steiner, before he got super roided, was
big
like,
Papa Pump.
he's a lot more athletic, acrobatic, I should say.
Was he the one that had the chainmail hat
Yeah.
thingy on and the blonde
Later
beard?
on,
Yeah, towards the end, he got like super veiny.
He was huge.
Yeah.
At one point, he was going to be the world. Well, he was positioned to possibly be a world heavyweight champion in NWA, early WCW, but he couldn't cut a promo for his life at the time. And promo being, like what I just read from Macho Man and earlier Hulk Hogan, but he had a match with Ric Flair, the champion, at a Clash of Champions, which was a televised, kind of like a pay-per-view event, but on TV for free on TBS. Great, like mini pay-per-views and free pay-per-views. And it was a great 5-star match that he put on with Flair. But then again, right, Diallo? Flair, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, put on a 5-star match with every single person he was in the ring with.
Yeah. I mean,
He made everybody look good.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Because he sold everything, right?
Yeah.
He knew how to sell it,
Yeah. There you
and
go.
he never broke kayfabe.
There you go.
But speaking of potentially breaking kayfabe, or changing the rules, or maybe like opening up a lens to things that I didn't know at the time, a little TV show called Learning the Ropes, and Diallo's going to tell us all about that show.
Hey everybody, Corey here. I just want to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Imagine being one of the last people on Earth, being trapped alone with something not human, something always watching, something always waiting. What would you do? Where would you run? Where would you hide if you were haunted for 7 winters alone?
Podcasting After Dark presents 7 Winters Alone.
a dystopian haunted house story by David Irons. Available now in paperback and ebook.
And now, back to the show.
Nothing's gonna keep us from learning the ropes.
I got Shauna Nana vibes from
No, totally.
that,
Yeah,
Hells
totally.
yeah.
I actually looked it up. It's really hard finding a lot of research for this show because I was trying to figure out if it was actually the same people that wrote that theme song. But anyways, Learning the Ropes. It was a TV show sitcom that was made and it was actually filmed in Canada. It aired on CTV in Canada, and it was in the United States in syndication. This show is so obscure that IMDb can't decide on how many episodes there were actually made versus what like Wikipedia and other sources say. So most of the sources say that there were 26 episodes. IMDb says 13, but IMDb doesn't even have like the names of the episodes except for the pilot. Even though those episodes do exist, somebody just like, and I guess where I'm going is it's so obscure nobody even bothers to like input the information on IMDb. So if there's anybody out there watching this now, you can kind of go in and fill that in. You'll be the first one.
Because it says 1988, and then it's got the dash, and it has no end date on it, and it doesn't even have like the cover of like the show. It's just a random picture
poor Lyle Alzado.
of Lyle. Yeah.
So it was a super like, super obscure show. I think it probably only ran 13 episodes just from like the time that it was on. It wasn't even on a full season. I think it was about 6 months it was on. It was made as a sort of like a cross promotion with the NWA, Crockett Promotions, used it to sort of push a lot of their wrestlers as they were, and mostly in Canada. So I think the show was a little bit bigger in Canada, but I mean, that's like relatively speaking because it's still kind of bombed. It starred Lyle Alzado, who, if you do not know, is a legendary defensive end. He's most famous for the LA Raiders. He won the Super Bowl 18. They beat the Washington football team, then the Redskins. So they're the Commanders now. That is the worst name, the Commanders. The Washington football team was perfect. It sounded old school. It sounded like it was made in like the 30s. They should have kept
called
that.
the Washington Football Club.
Yeah, the Commanders sounds like it's like for a TV movie, Replacements 2 with Keanu Reeves. But anyways, so he also played with the Broncos and the Browns.
And I just want to jump in. I just want to jump in real quick that I think a lot of our listeners, Podcasting After Dark listeners, will know him from the movie Destroyer, 1988. I recognize this cover, but it also stars Deborah Foreman, Clayton Rohner, who of course Zach loves, and Anthony Perkins. It's funny because I actually read, because I've never seen the movie, because I always thought the cover of the poster looked stupid. But then I read the description of the film, and I was like, that's actually a pretty cool idea for a movie. It just has a terrible-ass cover. So actually,
Maybe it'll come up on Pad.
That would be cool, because not going to lie, now, Dalla, I'm sorry, I'll stop talking in 1 second, but I absolutely adored Lyle Alzado on this show. I thought he had so much charm and personality.
Yeah, he was really great. Like, because he was known for being like on the field, like, on the edge, tough bruiser. But on the show, he was like kind of like a cuddly teddy bear almost. Unfortunately, he has passed away. He died in I think it was 92 of a brain tumor at age of 43. He always blamed it on steroids, which he came out, was saying there's actually no real link to that, but he became sort of like an advocate for not doing steroids. But he was, so the whole premise of the show was that he was a teacher and vice principal at a private school. His wife and ex-wife left the family so she could go study law in London, and left him with his 2 children, who was played Mark Randall, who was played by Yannick Besson, I think his last name is. He's most famous now for a show called Murdoch Mysteries, a CBC show that does, it's like a detective mystery show in the 19th century Toronto. And he had a daughter named Ellen Randall, and she was played by, this is like significant for me, she was played by Nicole Stoffman, who aka Steph from one of my all-time favorite franchises on television, Degrassi Junior High. She literally was the reason why I stopped what I was doing to watch that show the very first time I saw it, because she was dressed up like as a normal schoolgirl, and then she left the house and went somewhere and changed her clothes and like looked all super risque before she went into school, and I was like, what is this show?
Sadly, the YouTube quality was so bad I could not even tell you what people's faces looked like.
Yeah, no, it was really bad. Like I know what she looks like, and I had a hard time actually discerning what she looked like. Yeah, so yeah, and again, that's another, like, this show is so obscure. Like, I think there's not even like a DVD out there for anybody to have ripped. So we were watching like VCR transfers, and like I said, like you can see the tracking marks and stuff on it. So kudos to whoever like held on to those and put those out there, because if not, we wouldn't have the show.
Yeah, you're the real hero out there in person, whoever you are.
Yeah. But sort of like the little premise or thing to the show was that he was a private school teacher, because his wife had left, he needed to make extra money. So he, in his like at night, he was a wrestler called the Masked Maniac, and the Masked Maniac was a jobber wrestler. So he was the one that sort of like got beat up by the other wrestlers every week. But it was sort of like it was like his secret identity. So the people at the school didn't know that he was a wrestler, and in the pilot episode, his children don't know either, and they find out. And then they keep that secret for him. But when he was actually in the wrestling world, they knew that he was a teacher, and there were often like these moments where he would like, riff on like English or whatever with some of the wrestlers to pull out some comedic elements. But yeah, he also had there was also another character who was sort of like a love interest for him named Cheryl Wilson, and she actually was in I was looking this up, I know the comic property really well, but I forgot that they made a TV movie of the show called Power Pack that she starred in. I think she was the mother in that.
I didn't. I'm this age. I'm 44 years old. I had no idea that they made a Power Pack TV show.
Yeah, it was a TV movie. It was really bad, and it did, it was 91, so they didn't. It took them till like 2000 till Blade, I think, came out before they even like were able to do anything not Superman or Batman that looked close to real. But now I'm like, they should actually do Power Pack on Marvel or on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, she was also in, I can't remember if this is one of the movies that he picked, but recently I was listening to one of the podcasts, and David Irons was picking his top. You guys were picking your top horror movies, and I think he picked When a Stranger Calls Back. I'm not sure. Okay. It was a TV movie, but she was in that. She was also on an episode of another old TV Obscura show we done called Midnight Caller. And,
Midnight Caller.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So it the big part of it for us is that it starred, or at least it had cameos of tons of NWA wrestlers. Ric Flair, Ron Garvin. Go back, you mentioned Ron Simmons, who was in that episode. Tully Blanchard, Ivan Koloff, the Road Warriors. And,
without their makeup.
Yeah, without their makeup. Ricky Morton, who I can't stand, but I love that episode. I was like,
can
whoa.
sell like a mofo.
Yeah. And also Dr. Death Steve Williams played the masked maniac on screen. So when as like the stunt double. So all the scenes where they had him is actually Dr. Death Steve Williams, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that till I just watched this, did some research for this. But yeah, it was I really loved the show. Obviously because I was like really into wrestling at that time. Steph from Degrassi Junior High was on it. And also for me, it was actually hard for me to watch NWA where I lived. So it was like my sort of like access to get to see a little bit more of those wrestlers that I had just started to come into knowing and liking and thinking, oh, I think I like this better than WWF. So yeah, it was really fun. Family sitcom. They learned lessons every episode. But it also was really terrible.
But in a good way.
Yeah, it was very, very wholesome. I mean, because
yes.
I'm super cheesy and I actually like that stuff. But I also acknowledge that, it probably like for its time, it probably wasn't really done really well. But I also think that you could do that. It had a good sort of like setup. You could actually do that show now, maybe as like
Great setup.
Maybe as a drama, like an hour drama instead. Have what's his name? You Can't See Me, and John Cena and somebody else in the roles. But yeah, it was a cool show, and I don't know. What do you guys think,
Corey?
Yeah. So. Yeah, this show, Diallo, you said it. It's a very sweet show. It's kind of a little bit cheesy, and I think that is its charm. Right from the get-go, the sitcom intro, the intro song and everything, it's so cheesy, but in the best, most wonderful 1988 way. I will say I watched episode 10, I think, because Diallo sent us like 3 or 4 of them, and so I just picked like the newest one that he sent. And so I didn't actually watch the first episode, but I did watch episode 10, and it had the 2 kids in it, and it had, the dad, and it dealt with the daughter drinking, and later, and she gets caught later and everything, but I thought they actually handled it really well, even to the point where the dad, he never seemed like a jerk. He was like, okay, let's discuss this and everything. I was like, oh, that's progressive. I was like, that's pretty cool. But at the end of the day, he is what I loved the most. I thought he was outstanding. I thought he did a good job of just being like this, like sort of a sweet guy. And I think maybe it's like the whole thing that we all have where like, you see somebody that's big and scary, but then they turn out to be nice, and we all like that kind of thing. And I think maybe this falls into that category, but I really liked it. I really, really liked the show. It's a shame that it doesn't exist. You can't freaking find it anywhere, and the episodes that we do have, you can barely even see their faces. But what I did see, I liked, and I thought it was sweet, and I thought they handled the problems well. Some stuff in the episode that I saw was a little bit of a product of its time, like they were actually doing group therapy as a team, which I thought was cool. But then they jumped to like this sort of a gay thing like right away, and I was like, oh, I was like, that's a shame, because I actually thought it was a really cool idea that he was like, we're not gelling as a team, in the locker room. We need to have some kind of therapy session or something. I was like, that's pretty progressive. And then, like I said, he was willing to like discuss stuff with his daughter and everything. And all at the end of the day, she was like, basically she just missed her dad. She was like, I feel like I'm growing up without you because her mom's gone and everything. He was like, you know what? You're grounded because you got drunk, but you know what? I promise I'll spend the time with you. And I was like, damn, this is really, really sweet. And my final note is very sweet show. And I liked it. Maybe it was because it was the first one that I watched, and I actually watched the Rock and Wrestling last. But I was like, okay, let's do this. Like, all right, I don't know what to expect. And I finished the episode, and I thought it was really nice. And I wish we actually had access to it because I would like to watch more of it. So that's where I stand on it.
Well, I will tell you how I feel about it by showing Corey and Diallo something that you guys obviously can't hear, but I'll describe it. I have a VHS tape. You can't read the writing because it's so small, but I actually have several episodes recorded on a VHS tape that I still have to this day.
Are you the one that uploaded those?
Yeah, are you the hero?
Yes, I am Spank Bank number 76. No, I'm kidding. Whoever uploaded it, thank you. I also have the interview Lyle Alzado did with, I think, the Today Show when he was dying of cancer. I still have the Sports Illustrated cover or magazine where he's on the cover and it just simply says "I lied" on it, and he's got a do-rag on, and he's looking half the man that he is. Because if you look at Lyle Alzado in Learning the Ropes, is so jacked up, he's so huge. I remember when he was promoting this show, I was obsessed with Lyle Alzado to the point where his stance on steroid use. I did a speech in school about like an informative speech in my speech class about Lyle Alzado and about steroids because I was so passionate about it. And in the steroid cases that were going on in the WWF, where Hogan was on the stand lying about steroid use, and I think Piper was honest on the stand, Roddy Piper, about his use of steroids, and which got him fired from the WWF for a while. I was really passionate about that because, let's be honest, steroids and wrestling go together like, hamburgers and cheese. So it just kind of goes together, and Lyle Alzado, I loved, and I was so sad when he died. And when he was promoting Learning the Ropes, I remember him saying it was supposed to shed a new light on on wrestlers because we looked at these guys like, over the top crazy people, and he's like, but they're just like us, and the way they featured NWA guys in this light was different from what you'd see on WWF. WWF was so afraid to break kayfabe, to suddenly show guys in a new light, like showing Nikolai Volkov as just a family man, or heaven forbid we show $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, who was an asshole in the ring, and having a kid dribble a basketball for $100 and kicking the ball away before he reached 100 dribbles or whatever.
Do you want that $500? The kid goes, yeah. How does it feel to want?
Right. Heaven forbid they show Ted DiBiase actually is a decent dude outside of the ring. And so this show was groundbreaking in that way. I loved it. Is it cheesy as fuck? Yeah, because it's like super 80s cliche sitcom stuff. Is Lyle Alzado a good actor? No. His lines are totally fed to him. You see, like when he delivers his lines, it's literally he's like just saying his line, and then everyone reacts off of him, which is totally fine, in my opinion. I don't have a problem with it. It's entertaining. Really quickly, I want to point out that Yannick Bison was in a TV show called The Adventures of Napkin Man. Which is it was a kid's show, but let's be honest, Napkin Man, not the best choice.
That's what you could call me sitting here at my desk every day. Napkin Man.
Yeah, so talk about breaking kayfabe. Breaking kayfabe, and talk about shooting. Yeah, so I love this show. I love the use of wrestlers throughout. Fucking Ronnie Garvin, he was butchered when he went to the WWF. He was made into a joke because this Vince McMahon, if you weren't a product of Vince McMahon and he brought you in from another territory, he crushed your career. It's infamous, the stories that have gone on when guys from other territories came to the WWF and WWE. Right? Yeah, he turned Terry Taylor, who was a legit badass in the AWA and NWA, and turned him into the Red fucking Rooster, and it was a joke. And it was such a shame because that guy could go. Anyways, seeing the Road Warriors without their makeup on for the first time, I tripped out and like talking normal. I was like, this is unheard of, And again, I love the show. I like I said, I still have it on VHS. There, by the way, there was another wrestling organization called USWA. Yeah, they were kind of big for a minute, and the UWF. But yeah, I loved learning the ropes. I'm so glad when Corey and Diallo and I were going around saying, okay, what shows are we going to talk about for TV Obscura? I was like, please, Diallo, because Diallo had sprinkled, I think I'm going to do learning the ropes, but then it wasn't locked in yet. And I'm like, please do learning the ropes. Please do learning the ropes. I really want to talk about learning the ropes. It's just a fun show, man. Like, especially if you like wrestling, seeing NWA guys at a time when WWF dominated everywhere. NWA was like the indie band, if you knew NWA, you were a part of the cool group. It's like you knew what was up. It was like knowing, when all the grunge bands came out, but you knew about Mudhoney or something like that. It was like, oh shit, yeah, you know what's up. It should have lasted longer. It should be rebooted now easily. I think it won't be because, Vince McMahon unfortunately still literally controls every aspect of wrestling. And far be it, heaven forbid, he reboots a show that he didn't have creative control over. Like, how dare someone else have a great idea about wrestling? And the guy's an egomaniac. He's responsible for a lot of great things in wrestling, but he's also responsible for a lot of terrible things in wrestling. And, a lot of the terrible culture that has been cultivated, throughout the past 20, 30 years. So he's responsible for a lot of that shit. So that being said, it was nice to see this and reminded of, oh yeah, NWA was really hopping back in the day. And, while WWF had WrestleMania, NWA had Starrcade, they had Halloween Havoc when they became WCW. And
Halloween Havoc, isn't that when RoboCop made an appearance?
Corey's favorite moment. I was just about to say favorite/shocking moment. Would that be your favorite/shocking moment? Because that was kind of a big deal.
I just learned about it a couple months ago, and I was shocked then, and I'm sure I would have been shocked way back in the past. But I was like, what the fuck, RoboCop?
Well, Sting needed backup to come to the ring, and they were doing, I think it was Capital Combat. He teased at Halloween Havoc that RoboCop was coming, I think.
Wait,
maybe
so Halloween Havoc,
flipping it.
So Halloween Havoc was NWA, right?
Yes,
and that was
or
mainly
WCW. Yeah.
Was that mainly a Canadian production? You said?
No, that was Canadian, but Canadian. I think they had the CWF right up in Canada. That was their wrestling fed up there. But
I don't know.
Even though.
I was just going to say, the only reason I was calling out the RoboCop thing is because I think that there was a RoboCop Canadian TV show.
Yes.
And maybe that was a tie-in with that. Is that what it was? Or was it a tie-in with the movie?
I think it was a tie-in with RoboCop 3.
3, yeah.
2.
I think it was 3. I think it was tie-in with 3.
Yeah, and Sting needed backup. Surfer Sting at the time before he became the Crow Sting.
The Crow Sting, yeah.
and he brought RoboCop to the ring and like ripped open bars or something like that. Diallo, what was your favorite? Do you have a favorite or shocking moment from wrestling or WrestleMania in particular?
For WrestleMania, not for WrestleMania, not so much. I mean, there are a lot of shocking moments I can remember off the top of my head. I remember when the Road Warriors turned on Sting. That was pretty brutal.
Oh, and in NWA.
Yeah. I remember they did their little finishing move on him 3 times in a row, and I was just like, I can't believe this happened.
He's already dead.
I think it was called the electric chair, wasn't it? Where they put the opponent up on their shoulders, and then Hawk would jump off the top rope and clothesline him.
Yeah,
devastating.
One of my I think actually here will be my favorite shocking moment. It wasn't WrestleMania, but SummerSlam. I think it was the first SummerSlam, and Brutus the Barber Beefcake was about to fight Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental Belt. He had been building up to this for months and months, and it was like, oh dude, he's finally gonna win this. He was actually at the time Brutus Beefcake was my favorite wrestler, and he got injured. And so they were like, we don't know. Somebody's going to fill in. We don't know. And Honky Tonk Man was just kind of standing out there, and we were waiting. We didn't know who was going to come out. Like, you literally had no idea who was coming out at the time. And all of a sudden, you hear this music. Dun, 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 dun. It was the Ultimate Warrior. And it was like, I remember just being like, holy shit. Like, it was the greatest moment. The Ultimate Warrior came running out. Like, it was like a 30-second match. It was great. He won the Intercontinental belt, and he bounced.
He ran out from Parts Unknown and he went back to Parts Unknown.
That's right.
But
That's
I just,
right.
I remember like that, but back in that time, like I literally did not think it was going to be him. Like I remember sitting there like not knowing who it was going to be. And there was no, you watch wrestling enough and you kind of get a sense of like, oh, someone's going to come out and do this or that. But at that time, I literally did not know that was going to happen. So that was one of my best shocking moments.
That's a great shocking moment.
Yeah.
That is a great shot. And it was really the birth of Ultimate Warrior becoming really who he was / is.
Yeah.
In a minute, I'm going to read you one of his promos from WrestleMania.
This is going to be good. It's going to be one of his stream of consciousness ones.
Before we get into that, I really want to quickly say, I was looking at Yannick in Learning the Ropes. I'm like, what else do I know him from? What else do I know him from? He was on a TV show called High Tide with Rick Springfield and George Segal, or Siegel. By the way, that's a kind of a Baywatch-ish ripoff. Not ripoff, but like the detective show set in Hawaii, even though they filmed it in Australia. Great show, in my opinion. And that may come up on TV Obscura down the road.
Cool.
One of my shocking moments that I'll keep specifically to WrestleMania was there was a tag team in the 80s called Strike Force. It was Tito Santana.
Strike hard, strike first, strike force.
Rick Martel. Rick Martel was the AWA World Champion. Again, he was somebody that was kind of buried in the WWF because he ended up becoming the model Rick Martel, and like a cheesy thing where he would spray people with perfume or cologne called Arrogance.
Wasn't Tito in Rock and Wrestling? Tito Santana?
Yeah, he was.
Tito Santana
Okay.
was in Rock and
Yeah, he
Wrestling.
was.
Yep. And they became Strike Force. They had a song called Girls in Cars by Robbie Dupree, who sang the song Steal Away. You know that yacht rock song? But Girls in Cars. Din, din,
love
din,
girls.
din, din, Girls in Cars. It's a great song.
Yeah.
I have it on cassette. But they were a great tag team. Total baby faces. Babyface, by the way, being the full face moniker.
Oh,
and they were
okay.
full-
So face is short for baby face. Is heel short for anything, or is it just heel?
No, I think it's just heel.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were they wrestled Demolition, I think, at like WrestleMania 4 or 5. It might have been 5.
I think it was 4.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. It was 4. And for the World Heavyweight titles, and Demolition, let's be honest, they were a ripoff of the Road Warriors and not nearly as good, in my opinion. And Strike Force, I thought, was going to beat Demolition for the titles, and they didn't. They lost, and Rick Martel turned on Tito Santana. Turning meaning like he basically became a heel instead of a face, and he turned on Tito, and it was a heartbreaking, crushing moment for me as a kid because it was like, I loved Strike Force. They had a badass T-shirt, and Tito Santana, they both had white tights. Tito had a little sombrero on his tight, and Rick Martel had a little lightning bolt on his tight. And I just thought they were so badass, red and white, and it just broke my heart as a kid. I'm like, no, I love Rick Martel because he was such a cool dude. And anyways, that was one of my heartbreaking moments.
Oh man.
So there you go.
Hey everybody, Corey here. I just wanted to let you know that we'll be right back after these short messages.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim,
And I'm Dean.
and we're the hosts of Talking Back. We're a retro-based podcast covering movies, comics, video games, and more.
Check us out every Monday where we hit the rewind button and dig into some of our favorite content from the past. We like to keep things fun, lighthearted, and informative.
Do you feel like you need more nostalgia in your life? Then check out Talking Back. We're available everywhere podcasts are found.
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam.
I'm John.
And every week we are giving you a blast from our past.
We are the podcast that brings you full-on movie breakdowns, TV show reviews, album reviews, top 10s, and more, all from the things of our nostalgic past.
So please join us every single week on the Blast from Our Past podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. However you listen to podcasts, you can find us, and we would love to have you take a trip with us to the land of nostalgia.
And now, back to the show.
Before I get into my episode, I really quickly want to read to you a promo from The Ultimate Warrior. I'm going to save, in my opinion, one of the best promo cutters of all time to the end. But The Ultimate Warrior wrestled Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 6 for the World Heavyweight title. It was title versus title. Ultimate Warrior was the Intercontinental Champion, which I think he carried that title since he beat Honky Tonk Man. No one could beat The Ultimate Warrior. And he wrestled Hulk Hogan.
Sorry, what year would WrestleMania 6 be?
So 4 was 88,
Okay.
5 was 89. So this would be 1990.
Okay.
And yeah, this was like the culmination of two, never in the history of wrestling, WWF wrestling at the time, were there two faces facing off in the ring against each other. Who are you going to cheer for? It was, in my opinion, one of the best build-ups, best moments of wrestling. Whether the match was that great or not, it's in the history of wrestling, it's so important to watch because it was like two fan favorites, the top guys. It's like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, facing off. It literally is that. And they went at it, but the promos leading up to this were so terribly absurd in a good way. An Ultimate Warrior who is super roided out. I'll cut some of the stuff he said, but he said, Hulk Hogan. He said, I have a question. No, this is literally word for word what he says. Hulk Hogan, have a question to answer your question. As you, Hulk Hogan, travel to WrestleMania by conventional means, the normals you travel with experience malfunctions. As you realize all that is left is total self-destruction. Do you, Hulk Hogan, show self-pity? Do you, Hulk Hogan, try to reason why? Do you, Hulk Hogan, try and comfort the normals that have even more fear than you? You, Hulk Hogan, must self-destruct so that you will know, Hulk Hogan, who is the chosen one. For Hulk Hogan, I am not the chosen one that you speak of. I am not. I, Hulk Hogan, am the only one. I cut out a big chunk because I'm like, just get to it. People are like, oh, he said gibberish bullshit. If you break it down, it kind of makes sense, actually. And it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's neat. I always liked Ultimate Warrior.
As he kind of went further along in his career, he started to be a lot more rambly and kind of out there
and racist.
With one of the stuff. When he was still wrestling, but he actually wrote Ultimate Warrior comic book where he meets Santa Claus, and it is one of the most his promos kind of reminded me of the writing in there. It was far out. I don't know what he was talking about. So it was the weirdest, strangest thing you've ever seen. But it was the
and
Ultimate
he
Warrior
changed his name.
Santa. Yeah, he did, to the Warrior.
Wow.
To the Warrior.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like his first
Rest
name
in
is
peace.
The, and then
No,
last
just
name
Warrior.
Warrior.
Just
Gotcha.
Warrior.
Yeah.
All right.
And rest in peace. The guy, you know what? He had some moments where he goes, he was absurdly bad, with his thoughts on certain things, but he seemed to turn that around as he got older and started to become a little bit more humble in his ways and wanted to be like a role model overall to people. And then he had a heart attack and died. So there you go.
It's almost as if they all go out that way, right? Isn't that how Macho Man went out?
Macho Man had a heart attack and died. Yeah, if you run down the 1991 SummerSlam card, speaking of SummerSlam, I think like 85% of those dudes are now dead.
Oof.
So
I mean, that was like go back to the steroids thing. That's really what that and the cocaine really was.
Yes.
And like the punishment that they were putting on their bodies and stuff. Like a lot of those guys are gone. It's pretty wild to watch.
It's amazing to me that somebody like Ric Flair is still alive after all these years.
Yeah.
Because that guy they called him the 60-minute man. He would wrestle 2 60-minute matches a night sometimes. These guys were on the road 300 plus days a year, putting their bodies on the line. So for the guys that are still alive, like the fact that Hogan's still alive, is pretty surprising, because these guys die off like flies. There was a time in the late 90s when all those dudes from the 80s were just dropping off because they were just like, their bodies were giving out on them. So the fact that some of these old timers are still around, says a lot. And so, the pain pills that they put in their systems, having to stay up all the time, it's a lot. It is a modern day circus is what it is.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of 1991, to wrap up our shows, I'm going to take us down a little trip of memory lane into the television pilot episode of Tag Team.
Also listed as a TV movie on IMDb.
Yes, it officially and technically is a pilot series on ABC. It was supposed to be greenlit for at least 13 episodes. It didn't make it past the pilot episode. It aired on January 26th, 1991, the day before the Super Bowl. So most people probably didn't watch because they're like, I'm going to be in front of the TV all day tomorrow. Might as well not watch tonight. It starred 2 absolute, without a doubt, legends of wrestling, Roddy Piper and Jesse the Body Ventura. Roddy Piper, I mentioned the thing when he first started out with the sandpaper on his forehead. If you don't know his true full backstory, there's a great WWF documentary that was put out a while ago. You might be able to find it on the Peacock Network. It's really good. The guy had a rough go, and to really, he pioneered the career of, ultimate wrestler into a really good actor. Besides They Live, he's in a fun Dirk Benedict comedy called Body Slam, which is another fun wrestling movie if you guys want to go down the wrestling route. I love that movie personally. And, he was in a ton of B movies, straight to video films with like Billy Blanks and many others.
Frogtown.
Frogtown, of course. Hell Comes to Frogtown. Really good actor. Before The Rock and before John Cena, who we talk about and say, oh, those guys are actually good actors. He was way better than Hogan. Like, he was the shit. Like, he could actually act. And another guy, Jesse the Body Ventura, before Abraxas. Obviously he was in Predator and he was in The Running Man, and then became the governor of Minnesota and a huge conspiracy theorist. But in a way, if you listen to his conspiracy theory rants, they actually might swerve you a little bit. You might go, okay, I kind of buy this the way he's talking about it, because he's very convincing. And I always love the fact that he's legit a former Navy SEAL, and my dad being a former Navy SEAL, I'm like, this guy's cool, Anyways, those 2 star as Rick McDonald. Roddy Piper plays Rick McDonald. Jesse Ventura plays Bobby Youngblood. They play 2 pro wrestlers who are told the night before they're supposed to go out to a wrestling match that they're going to take a dive and lose the match. And this is a total kayfabe show where everything in wrestling's real, quote unquote.
That's what I was going to ask. This show makes you, like, I was watching, I was like, you have to think that wrestling is real as boxing is. And again, we know that it's real, but you know what I mean? And where people could take dives and whatnot. So right away I was like, oh, okay, so people can, like, okay, so it's not actually a look into real wrestling. It's more of, like you said, okay. That makes sense for me.
Yeah, because I think at the time they might have still been under WWF kind of contracts, so I think there was a little bit of a hand in that. Vince McMahon, oh, how dare we ever break that wall, right? But the wrestling promoter, it comes to both of them backstage. They're a tag team. It's kind of seeing how they are going to be before the match. And the wife of the promoter comes in and she's like, I want you guys to lose tonight. And it's played by Shannon Tweed in a cameo. And Shannon Tweed was hot at the time, still is, in my opinion. And they decide not to take the dive, which gets them kicked out of wrestling permanently. They have a bunch of different random jobs, like from being movers to self-defense dummies. And they land on one night they're at a grocery store. They foil robbers trying to rob the grocery store. The grocery store, by the way, looks quite a bit like the one in the movie Intruder.
Yeah, you asked me to look out for that, but I was so distracted by the fact that I think the guy that Jesse Ventura lands on, the guy with the shotgun, I think he was in Hard Target. I think he had the glasses on. And didn't Jean-Claude Van Damme like kick him in the face and knock his cigar? That was him, right?
Yes, that same guy.
I fucking knew it. And just while I'm calling it out now, because you mentioned the self-defense class, that was Kathy Kenny from the Drew Carey Show.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Leading
cool,
that
yeah.
one,
So they foil these robbers at a grocery store, and the cops that actually show up to the scene to arrest the robbers say to the two of them, you guys are cops, right? They think they're cops. And then they get the bright idea that they should become police officers. They go through police academy training, become cops, and on their first day on the job, by the way, their trainer, or the person in charge of them, who later on becomes their like captain of the police force, is played by Robin Curtis,
who is Savick in Star Trek 3 and 4.
Yep.
That is not logical.
He's fantastic in that. And so on their first day on the job officially as cops, they get told they're going to go undercover to protect a woman who needs to testify against some dudes who killed some undercover cops.
Wait, a woman that needs to testify against a sexually aggressive professor, maybe?
Yeah, because this woman that they're kind of looking out for is played by who, Corey?
Jennifer Runyon. She was the beginning of Ghostbusters when Venkman is doing his little, card trick thingy and hitting on her.
Ghostbusters and Up the Creek, which is a terrible movie, and the movie is terrible. But she was also in a very Brady Christmas. I think she plays the wife of one of the Brady kids.
She was in Charles in Charge, wasn't she?
She was Charles's
his girlfriend. The first season.
Without a doubt, like stunningly beautiful, but probably the queen of the pout face, like the ultimate pouty face. I've never seen I've never seen an actor pout as authentically and beautiful as she does, by the way. Anyways, they're protecting her. And I won't say much more about that, but because I don't want to spoil it. It literally it was one episode. It was a pilot. The pilot in its entirety is on YouTube with commercials from 1991, which is really amazing, which got me so choked up when they showed a Lifesavers commercial of a dad and his son watching a sunset. And I'm just like, that's me and my son. Oh my God. Losing my shit.
Of all the times that we watch stuff, this was the first time we got commercials in our YouTube videos. It's fantastic. And guys and gals, we post them all on Patreon the week prior, so for free. So if you're listening to this on the free feed, you can head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/podcastingafterdark, and completely for free, we post all of the TV Obscura links on one post, and so you can go watch them. So the one we're talking about, this one right here, is on there. The link's on there. It's, worth watching. I mean, I like the show. We'll get into that in a second. But it's got the commercials on it, guys and gals. It's awesome.
It's so great. I think Otherworld was another show that there are different versions of it online, but you can find the one with the commercials intact, which is so great, so vintage. Yeah, you got to watch. I think it's the only version of this is on the only version that's online has all the commercials in it. But it's a very basic premise. You get the sense that, the further adventures that these guys would go on is they'd become undercover cops on these no longer wearing uniforms, right? Jesse Ventura is kind of he's not a very good actor in my opinion. He's kind of cheesy. He delivers his lines kind of flat, but he's still really likable. And then Roddy Piper is the fucking man. I'm sorry. Like, you know, even when he's overacting, you want to see him overact because he's so damn good. His haircut is terrible, by the way. He's got like a page boy haircut. And I'm like, what the fuck is up with this He-Man hairdo? However, he's still badass. And you know, this was like he was winding down his wrestling career, and so was Jesse. Jesse was like a full-time commentator from like mid-'80s on, right?
Yeah.
And I think he ended up going to WCW soon after this. But, you know, this show showed so much potential. It's cliche as hell. It's everything you would expect in a cop show, formulaic as hell. But there's a lot of charm. I'm gonna stop talking about my love of it, and I want to see what you guys thought. Diallo, I'll start with you. What did you think of Tag Team?
So I had never seen it. That was in that, again, I can talk about it on multiple episodes, but that was right in that era where I was in college in Vermont, and we at that time didn't have cable. We only got like 2 over-the-air stations, didn't have a TV. So I missed a lot of TV and wrestling at that time, cartoons, and I only would get to watch stuff when I came back home.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it was terrible. I really did. Like, I really was like, not getting to watch wrestling every Saturday was the worst. The worst at that time. But I remember when it came out, and I remember hearing about it, but obviously it didn't go anywhere. And again, especially in those days, it would be really hard to find. So this was my first time seeing it. I mean, I saw the potential in it. I wasn't like terribly judgmental about any of the things that I think like didn't work. I do think that it kind of it spent too much time on the setup to get to the part where they're cops. But
yes.
Other than that, I actually thought it was like kind of fun, charming. There's an academic term that the show's based in. It's called homosocial bonding, and it really typifies like the makeup of that show, because they're the male to male camaraderie bonding between the two of them is really the basis of the show. And one of the things I thought was interesting was that a lot of cop shows in that vein would have one of the guys kind of falling for the hot woman, which would have been Jennifer Runyon. But in this case,
in that episode,
like it was almost like these two were the couple.
Yeah.
And I thought it was actually a really interesting choice and dynamic. So, but other than that, yeah, it was, you know, Roddy Piper and Jesse Ventura, and like Jesse Ventura, I know mostly from, his commentary. So it was really interesting to see him even in those scenes where they were wrestling. You know, I've seen some old footage and stuff. Yeah,
because he stopped wrestling in the early 80s.
Yeah,
he really did.
Yeah,
he tapped out, I think, around 82 or 83. I don't think he was even in the first WrestleMania.
No, just as Diallo was talking, I was literally thinking, I was like, I know Jesse Ventura. I know he's a wrestler. I don't think I've ever even seen like a picture of like what he looked like, you know, in the ring. And then Zach, you answered it for me as to why. It's because, yeah, he stopped wrestling way before I even, you know, got into it.
And his whole gimmick with the, oh yeah.
Okay. He kind of was like, I mean, Hogan took a lot of his look from Jesse, and Superstar Billy Graham also kind of looked a lot like him. So yeah, he definitely was like a trailblazer with the look.
Hogan also took the baldness from him
the
too.
baldness, yeah.
True. Superstar Billy Graham started that tie-dye trend. Then Jesse picked up on it, I think, when he was in the AWA.
Yeah.
And he had the flashy sunglasses. And then Hogan like took elements of both of them. Mm-hmm. And then Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner, kind of took elements of those dudes later on as well. So
put some chainmail, slap some chainmail on top of that.
Before Corey jumps in here, I also want to say there's a really heartfelt moment with Piper and Ventura in the pilot when Piper's like, I really like when they join the force and their first day in, they get suspended their first day in. And Piper's like, I really was thinking we were fitting in here, or we were part of a family or something like that. And it's such a genuinely like real moment, because if you know Piper's backstory, he was an orphan and he was professional wrestling at like 14 or 15 years old. This guy never had a family per se. So you get the sense that he always wanted to be a part of a family. So there's a lot of realness there. But
yeah,
anyways.
that theme kind of ran through the episode. If he said it multiple times, and I remember the scene you're talking about. I thought it was, I too was like, sort of like, oh wow, that seems very honest for such a silly show in the best way possible. Yeah. I had so much fun with Tag Team. I think mainly it's because I thought Rowdy Piper and Jesse Ventura had great chemistry together, and I really liked what their characters were about. Like, I liked how they were there for each other. They supported each other. I liked how Jesse Ventura's character's like, look, dude, like I'll take the fall. The owner of the company, the wrestling company, he likes you more. Just I'll say it's all me, and then you can keep wrestling. But I like how Roddy Piper's like, no, dude, like you're my bro. Like we're pals. And I was like, it's such a strong bonding show. I loved it. But I also like the action was like silly and fun, but like bigger than it should have been. Like with the whole gig and the whole gag with the piano falling, like they blew out a damn brick wall and then like dropped it on a car. And then like in the grocery store scene where they're fighting the guys and everything, when they like knock like a giant, like some dumpster or something into the car, like there's some good stunts in this and some good action in it. I thought this thing had so many good points going on. They had a really cool house. Like they both lived together in this like sort of converted warehouse that's also a gym, and yada yada yada. And I was like, this is really cool. And at the end of the episode, they have a dog named Body Slam, and I'm like, I am loving everything about this show. I really really enjoyed it. My only question was, why didn't they just jump right to PIs? Like, I would have gone the private investigator route versus the cop route, and just been like, maybe made them kind of guys who were, helping out people who needed help, like an A-Team sort of thing. But I get that they were trying to be more realistic, and they were like, okay, how are we going to make rent now and everything? So I was like, okay, I honestly liked all the choices that show made and where the characters went and what they did. Damn, it's a damn shame that it didn't go to series, but I highly recommend everybody watch it. It not just for the commercials. That's a fucking bonus. That is a bonus. But it was fun. It wasn't as like saccharine sweet, obviously, as Learning the Ropes, because that was a sitcom, and that was about 3 years prior. But it had an interesting quality about it where it didn't quite take itself too seriously, but it didn't also feel like a fake world. It had a nice sort of vibe to it that I really enjoyed. And I think at the end of the day, the cornerstone is Rowdy Piper and Jesse Ventura. Really, I think they worked really well together. I didn't have any problem with Jesse Ventura's acting, but at the same time, I'm never expecting any wrestler to be a good actor anyways, so I'm always surprised when they are. And I think John Cena's fucking fantastic. I never thought that until I saw Peacemaker, man. Yep. Like, wow. But, yeah, this show was fucking awesome. Tag Team, what the fuck? Where'd this come from, man?
Yeah, and I want to point out, too, as generic as hell as the villains were in this episode, they could fight pretty damn well.
There were a lot of roundhouse kicks, man.
Yeah, roundhouse kicks, dude. Yeah, and very impressive. And the wrestling moves that they used in like everyday battling, obviously it doesn't, hold a candle to the fight that Rowdy Piper had with, David Keith and Keith David in They Live. But it's pretty damn close. You get elements. Roddy Piper knows how to stage fight. He really does. He knows how to make it look effectively good.
He knows how to sell it.
He totally knows how to sell it. Nice. Look at you getting all into it.
Oh, pro.
Yeah. Definitely check out Tag Team. It's a shame that didn't happen. I have this sneaky suspicion Vince McMahon had something to do with it. It's an ABC show, by the way, and even though Vince McMahon was tight with NBC, who knows? Vince McMahon screws people over all the time. He's been doing it since he started out, and he's a mafia boss. He's a total mob boss, and it's a shame. I'm going to read one more promo, but before I do, I really quickly want to say the reason I'm shouting out these promos for this episode is because they're all WrestleMania themed. If we ever go down this road, and I really hope we do, I would love to talk about more of the NWA promo people. Ric Flair, probably one of the best promo men of all time. All around greatest wrestlers of all time, if you think about it. Dusty Rhodes, great promos as well. But Jake the Snake Roberts was known as being one of the best talkers in the business. He didn't do a whole lot in the ring, and and that's not always what mattered. What mattered was if you could talk and sell the match up to the point and after the point. And at WrestleMania 6 again in 1990, he had a match with $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, and $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, he had a $1 million belt. There was a diamond-studded belt with dollar signs on it, and it was on the line against Jake the Snake Roberts, and the outcome of the match was terrible. It was a count-out. The $1 Million Man won because Jake the Snake was outside of the ring. Interference with somebody else. I don't remember the exact particulars off the top of my head, but I just remember being super pissed off because Jake the Snake should have won. This is a guy, by the way, that never won a title and should have. And there's a whole line of people who didn't need to win a belt, but still were over as fuck. And if you're over, that means you're huge, right?
Okay. That's a term I did not know.
Okay, well, there you go. Diallo's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know.
So Jake Roberts delivered this promo against $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. And if you don't know this promo, you can look it up online because it's so good. But this is Jake. Well, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. Here we are at WrestleMania, and it's the biggest match of your career. Why? Because everything you stand for is on the line, mainly the $1 Million belt. Oh yeah, you see it can be yours once again. All you have to do is go through Damien, his snake, and me. But you see, Damien and I don't forget. We remember all the times you made people grovel for your money. These were people far less fortunate than you, people who could use your money for essentials. And what did you do? You made fun of them, you humbled them, and you humiliated them. Well, now it's my turn. I'm going to make you beg. DiBiase, you're going to get down on your hands and knees, and this time you'll be the one that's humbled. This time you'll be the one that's humiliated, and this time you'll be the one that grovels for the money. And how appropriate that the money you grovel for is your very own, a victim of your own greed, wallowing in the muck of your avarice.
Oh, throwing in some avarice. Yeah.
How fucking badass is that?
That's a
badass
good speech.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome.
Well written.
I mean, that's all Snake, He was a heel face all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Diallo knows very well he had the Snake Pit. That's not where Hogan, Andre turned on Hogan. However, it was a moment, I think they had their moments on that show as well. It was just a beautiful promo for a match that was kind of lackluster and disappointing. Yeah. But you know what? At the end of the day, the fact is Jake the Snake Roberts is still alive thanks to Diamond Dallas Page.
Yeah.
Quick shout out to DDP Yoga because that shit works. And, here we are talking about wrestling of yesteryear. But as we start to wrap up, let's kind of go down the row. And two things. One, your favorite WWF wrestler. And two, if you have your favorite overall wrestler. It could be from any particular company. So, Corey, who's your favorite wrestler of all the times?
You've mentioned a few that I loved growing up. Jake the Snake Roberts, the Road Warriors. I loved Razor Ramon, R.I.P. My buddy Xair is friends with DDP. He was friends with Razor Ramon and everybody, and that sucked, man. That hit hard. I felt bad for him. So, yeah, R.I.P. to Razor Ramon. I love that dude. one of my, and I'm saving my all time favorite for 1 second, but I did like Sting back in the day. I thought he was cool too, but my all time favorite wrestler, it's gotta be Kane. It's gotta be Kane, aka Isaac Yankem. Love me some Kane. I always liked the mask. I thought the mask was cool. I didn't like it when he took the mask off, but I'd say ultimately forever and ever, Kane, like the classic masked Kane, is my favorite wrestler of all time.
Nice one. That's very impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Are you impressed that I knew his name was Isaac Yankem before that?
Yeah, yeah. And if you look at pictures of him as Isaac Yankem, you know why he put a mask on.
Yeah. So yeah, Kane. Love me some Kane.
Isn't he like a
Diallo,
mayor?
how about you?
Yeah, he's like a mayor of some, I think, town
like
in
Tennessee.
Atlanta. Tennessee, yeah.
He's problematic now.
Oh no,
From
is
what I
he?
hear. From what I hear, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I like the character.
Yeah,
not
you know.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, that's I think that's going to be maybe for all of us. You like the character, you don't like the dude. There you go. Diallo, how about you? Who are some of your favorite wrestlers?
I mean, geez, there were so many that like I mentioned, Brutus Beefcake I liked a lot back in the day. Tag teams. My
Bushwhacker,
favorite,
baby.
yeah, Bushwhacker. My favorite tag team of all time is Midnight Express. Really loved those guys. But I have to say, the two men that have sent more men running than X-Lax, Sweet Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby. Did I say that wrong? The
You got
Midnight
it.
Express. Yeah, Jim Cornette, man. He's great.
Cornette.
He has a great podcast now too.
And by the way, great talker.
He's a great talker.
He'd say shit like, "He's so dumb it takes him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes."
He's great. Like he's still he has a podcast now, and he's awesome. He just
Awesome.
just riffs on all that stuff in
He
the
shoots.
past. It's great. But yeah, they were like my favorite tag team. But it's funny because like you said, like your favorite wrestler character might not be your favorite. Like you might not be a good person, but I actually have a personal story with my favorite wrestler, who is Bret the Hitman Hart. And he was my favorite wrestler all for years. And
The excellence of execution.
Yeah, I mean, I literally started liking him as a wrestler because of his skill in the ring, like the way he did his moves, and you saw the precision that he had. It was really fascinating to watch. And then he went from tag team to doing solo, and I saw even more of it. But actually, I know this is supposed to be short, but this is really
Take your time.
it kind of ties into what Corey was talking about with Owen Hart at the beginning, but set the way back machine going to school in Vermont, and I was out one night, and I knew that they were wrestling in town, and as big of a fan, I didn't go. I don't know why I didn't go that night to wherever they were at, but we were all at a bar, and after the match, some of the wrestlers just ended up just kind of hanging out. And so there's Bret Hart sitting at a table, and he's just kind of by himself. And I always forget the other wrestler's name. He was big at the time, but he was off in the back. He's kind of an a-hole, and he was like, I tried talking to him, but all he was doing was rapping lyrics to Regulate, so no one could talk to him. But anyways,
What do you look like?
I know who he is, and I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah.
You would when I'll show you a picture and you'll remember, but I can't remember his name right now. It's
He wasn't perfect, was he?
No, of course it wasn't Kurt Hennig. Anyways, so I actually sat down and I was like, hey, you're my favorite wrestler. Just want to say hello. And dude starts asking me questions. So where are you from? San Francisco. Oh, it's a beautiful city. I love it there. He's a guy talked to me for a half hour to an hour.
That's awesome.
And it was when you talk about because sometimes they say don't meet your heroes.
Yeah, right.
Like that actually was. I mean, he was like a. You got the impression that he actually was a kind, beautiful soul. Wow. He was very caring. He was very engaging. I mean, he was asking me about myself. Like he wasn't, it wasn't me just like, oh, like this, It was really cool, and he was very gracious, and he seemed like he took a genuine interest in me. But at the time, also, I remember kind of looking off to the corner, and Owen was in the corner playing this video game for most of the night by himself. I think he had a wife at the time, and she was kind of floating around too. So yeah, that was that's like a great moment. He was
awesome.
Already my favorite wrestler, and then he actually was a really great human being. And
that makes me like him
passed,
more.
Yeah, when Owen passed, I remember that night because I was just like, it's kind of I always remember him in the corner playing video games by himself the entire night, and just kind of sad where he ended up. But
yeah, if you guys don't know the story about Owen Hart, it's pretty tragic. It's very tragic, and it's a shame that Brett was not in the company with Owen at that time. He had jumped over to WCW, pretty around, like roughly around the same time frame, and Owen was kind of resurrecting his Blue Blazer character under this mask, and it was really a shame. Obviously, it should never have happened, and Brett's career was ended abruptly by Bill Goldberg because he botched a move in the ring, and to this day Brett still holds a grudge against Goldberg because Goldberg still comes and wrestles for several $1 million once a year for the WWE, and Brett's got that cross to bear, unfortunately, with all the shit that's happened to him in his life. He doesn't seem to be really at peace with everything because he'll go on podcasts and talk about things, and you just can tell that he still holds a grudge against certain people, and there's he really believes in like the integrity of the sport, and it's a shame that he hasn't really, he's acknowledged for being one of the best wrestlers around and one of the best promo guys. When he turned heel, full-fledged heel back in the day in the 90s, that was a game changer. Some say that was the beginning of the Attitude Era when Brett snapped. But it's kind of up for debate, which is great.
Well, that kind of makes sense. If he's sitting there talking to Diallo for an hour and a half, and Diallo's got the sense that he's probably like a kind of a sensitive kind of guy. Yeah, he might not be able to get over those traumas that have happened to him.
Yeah, and then Chris Benoit was a friend of his as well, and that whole deal was messed up too. So yeah, he is the best. I can see why people consider him to be the best there was, the best there is, the best there ever will be. If you don't know his matches, go watch his matches. They're phenomenal. The dude, he used to do his like submission move on a ring post when he became heel. Like it was insane. It looked like he was going to rip the guy's leg off the ring, But yeah, all my favorite wrestlers are not from WWF. They were probably in WWF at some point, but Surfer Sting is my all-time favorite wrestler.
Okay.
I will die on that cross. He's the ultimate babyface and just fun. So colorful, so fun. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, when he went from WWF, his highest moment in WWF was winning the Intercontinental title against Macho Man.
Still one of the greatest matches ever.
One of the greatest matches of all the times in WrestleMania history. Yeah. Goes over to NWA and has legendarily amazing matches with Ric Flair.
They were so
won
good.
The title. Was a world heavyweight title holder there for a minute. He's one of my tops. And Flying Brian Pillman, before he became the loose cannon in WWF, he was Flying Brian before he had a horrible car accident, which basically changed the trajectory of his career. And he had to become like more of a ground wrestler versus a flyer. He was in NWA/WCW, and he was amazing. The dude was on fire. And one of my favorite matches, you guys can look this up on, I think it's free on YouTube. It was a War Games match. The War Game matches where they put two rings next to each other and then put a cage around it and a cage on top. So you're like caged in, and there was like two teams of 5. 2 wrestlers would start at the same time from either side. And then every 3 minutes, another wrestler would come in. There'd be a coin flip to decide who would go in next, right? And it was like the 4 Horsemen and Larry Zbyszko, maybe, I forget, maybe, with like Sting's team, which was Flying Brian, Sting, the Steiner brothers, and it was amazing. And it is one of the greatest. It might have been 4-on-4, but it is one of the best matches ever. When people say, "What's the gateway drug match for?" that I should get into, that's the match to watch, the War Games match. Steiner Brothers, again, one of my favorite tag teams of all times. You know, the 3 of us could go down memory lane on wrestling all night long. And dare I say, this might actually be our longest episode of TV Obscura for good reason.
I think it is.
You know, WrestleMania, by the time you either listen to this and it's already happened, it's not what it used to be. But if you're a wrestling fan, hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you're not a wrestling fan, well, you've got something to consider now. And check out these shows. Check out some of the matches and moments we talked about online. Most of it's all out there. But, you know, this hopefully will become a reoccurring theme at least once a year.
You know what? I like that. I am 100% down to talk wrestling with you guys as best I can. But I love listening to people talk about wrestling passionately like you guys do. I know you guys both love it, and I do love just being around people who are passionate about something. And I really enjoy talking about wrestling with you guys. So if you want to do this once a year for WrestleMania, I am 100% on board for that.
Yeah, we definitely will. There's so much to talk about. And we want to know from you guys, if you're wrestling fans, who were some of your favorites growing up? Let us know. Hit us up on Instagram and the Facebook, the 6 of you that are following us on Facebook.
Just do it on Instagram.
Talk about a territory that's running out of steam. Anyways, yeah, like let us know if you don't, or ask us our recommendations if you've got more questions about this episode, like what's a good documentary to check out or whatever. So much great shit. We didn't even get to talk about Kerry Von Erich having half a foot and wrestling in the WWF as the Texas Tornado with one fucking foot.
1 foot, yeah.
And doing drop kicks and all sorts of crazy shit.
So wild. That whole family story.
The Von Erichs.
Yeah, you can find, again, like there's just a bunch of videos that talks about that family. And I knew kind of about it at the time, but like actually hearing about it was, whew, man.
Yeah, Heroes of World Class. Check out Heroes of World Class.
Did he lose it? 2.5 hour. Did he lose it to the Beatus?
No, he was in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he committed suicide. So, and he was. Yeah, that's a rabbit hole to go down, and it, you know, ultimately some of this shit is very depressing, but you know, you got to take it in for what it is. Like it was also it was a wild time, and so these stories there is a dark side to wrestling. I know Vice TV has these dark side of wrestling documentaries. There was a definite dark time. However, if you want to kind of get into it, that's what you should check out too. So speaking of checking out things, Diallo, you have a lot to check out besides the fact that you are in impeccable shape and marathon runner and studly man. How can we listen to you? What do you got going on in the Diallo Jackson world?
Check it out. First Noel Chronicles, I finally have a schedule that is workable. Starting next month, I'll be releasing the next chapters on a monthly basis, and I will be releasing the audio chapters on a monthly basis, and the written versions will be coming out more frequently. So if you are a person out there that has been checking it out, you will be able to read them before you get the audiobook versions. And the text versions can be found on Kindle Vella, and the podcast is on all major podcasting platforms. And as well, I have Angela in the Dark, who we could use a really good bump right now in Eyes and Vision. We have some people looking at it. was kind of exciting, but still working on ears, and got some other stuff popping,
Percolating.
Yeah,
nice.
Percolating and popping.
Some really
Popping
cool
daddy.
stuff.
Come on.
Hopefully I can announce them. When I do get to announce, it's gonna be like, oh, damn, and I'll be like, damn, yeah, I know, and you'll be like, damn. So
you see, you're at the edge of a lightning bolt right now, and Daddy, I put my hand out to you, and I say, touch my hand, because these 5 fingers are all touching you.
The American Dream.
Yeah, you want to watch some good fucking promos? Look up Dusty Rhodes promos back before he became the WWF Polka Dot Hero.
Polka Dot.
Yeah.
Dude. He would his voice would get so hoarse whenever he would inhale. It was always that rough, it was crazy. Dude was
so good.
Dude was wild.
Was Goldust his son?
Yeah.
Goldust is his son. He's got 2 sons. He's got Dustin Runnels and Cody, who we're recording this before WrestleMania, but the prediction is that he was going to show up at WrestleMania.
Okay.
Which is a big deal. And he, Dusty Rhodes, that guy had a mind for the business. Mm-hmm. That guy could just he was a backstage booker that kind of, laid out the matches and the storylines and whatnot and would help people with their promos. And he was just all around amazing. And here's the thing that I loved about him. And he even said this too. He was super overweight, had this giant birthmark on his belly, did not look attractive by any means, by the quote unquote typical means. This guy was the world champion, and his whole gimmick was if I can do it, if I can reach the ultimate mountaintop, then you can do that too. And I think that's a beautiful message to send to all people. Yeah. Speaking of beautiful messages to send, Corey, do you have a beautiful message to send about Cartwright?
Yeah, go listen to it. Cartwright? That's the message.
That's your beautiful message.
That's my beautiful message. If you like Seinfeld, then go listen to Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast. Adam and I are about halfway through season 8. So yeah, we're barreling towards the end, but we are also covering Curb Your Enthusiasm on the Cartwright Patreon as well. So yeah, always loving Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. Zach, what you got going on at $2 late fee these days?
November, what the fuck? Rolling into April, we've got an upcoming interview with an actor named Nestor Serrano, as you that you should know from TV Obscura, from the Hat Squad, but he was in a movie called Hanging with the Homeboys in 1991. That's our latest episode that'll be coming out very soon. Great, little known film from the early 90s, and it was had a great cast: John Leguizamo, Nestor Serrano, Mario Joyner, Dougie Doug. Great fun, different kind of night, swingers, in the sense this one night changes everything, right? Swingers, diner, American Graffiti kind of vibe. Great movie. That's what we're doing over at $2 late fee.
Nice.
But I'll tell you what, brother, we and it's funny that we didn't really go off on Hulk Hogan, which is
it's interesting. We didn't even bring him up really.
You didn't need to.
You don't need to.
Exactly.
I will say this. Wrestling is wild. It's wacky shit, and I'm so glad we finally covered it on TV Obscura. 3 obscure as hell TV shows. I mean, granted, Corey's Rockin' Wrestling is probably the most mainstream, but shit, it's still very obscure. It's still very obscure. Yeah. So I think they all fit the category.
Yeah. And I love talking about them with you guys. Like I said, I mean, I may not be a wrestling super fan, but I think I held my own a little bit. Can I just ask, how did I do, guys?
What do you mean a little bit? You held it all the bit. You held all the bits.
Yeah. All the bits. Thanks,
you didn't
guys.
You didn't need anybody to tag in for you.
No, you made it to a time limit draw.
Even Jesse needed someone to tag in for him.
Oh,
penultimate action sequence, but not you.
That was great, by the way. That tag in for the final fight in Tag Team.
Yeah, it was
I don't
great.
want to describe it too much because y'all got to just watch it. Just watch it.
Please watch that. Yeah, watch that and watch Learning the Ropes. Oh man, it's so good. They're both
And
so
watch-
good.
And I'll say watch Rock and Wrestling. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's just weird shit. Just for the bits. Mean Gene Okerlund, another guy who's so good on the mic.
I miss
Rest
Mean
in
Gene
peace.
Okerlund. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, Mean Gene, Bobby the Brain Heenan. Oh my God, these guys were so funny. But yeah, educate yourself on a little bit of wrestling. And, know that by the time we get to the next TV Obscura, it's going to be another wild, wacky ride with the three of us. So until then, Diallo.
Oh, yeah. Get you on the obscure side.
Dig it! Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.
I'm John, and I'm the host of Action Action. Every week, I'm joined by James.
Heyo.
And Dustin.
Hello.
And each week, we review, debate, and rank a different action movie.
We're creating the ultimate list of action movies.
From awful to awesome.
So if you want to hear 3 more white guys with beards talk about action movies.
And argue about where they belong on our list.
And decide you hate us because we made fun of your favorite movie.
Join us every Tuesday, and you can find us on your favorite podcatcher.
And Steven Seagal is a joke.